Krysten McCaughey.
Yes.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Super excited to have you on. Nutrition is has been a big part of my life for the past 13 years. I've been working in nutrition. Awesome. And as I told you before, my nutrition knowledge is a very surface level in terms of going to school for it and that. So I love having on experts that actually went to school, because then I get to get a lot of my myths and questions answered that I think are what they are based on research, which is limited to the internet.
Sure. Always, yeah.
Right? So, mind you, I'm not like a TikTok researcher, but
thankfully.
Internet, just Google, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to have you on. So I had a couple questions, but the first thing I wanted to do was let's get started by just having you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background, your education, what got you into it, and where you kind of specialize now.
Yeah. As you mentioned, I'm Krysten McCaughey. I am a sports dietitian. So, went to grad school to become registered dietitian, and then 2 years later got my specialist certification. Started out working at Exos, which is a private training facility. Worked with a whole variety of different types of athletes there, different levels of athletes, which is really cool, from high school all the way up to Olympic level. And then from there went to USC for a little bit. Worked with a couple of different sports there, football, volleyball, basketball, and then actually came back to Exos in a slightly different capacity, but worked there for a couple more years, which was great. Got to work with, again, variety of athletes, retired NFL players, things like that. And then from there kind of branched out on my own. So now I do predominantly consulting. So I consult with Angel City FC as well as Concordia University, and then a couple private athletes. And then my kind of niche is high school athletes. I really like to educate that population on nutrition, just because I feel like there is, like you said, so much misinformation out there. Who knows where to get their information from? So I think it's a really fun population to work with.
So you're working with these younger athletes. Like, I remember the one thing working in nutrition and learning about how the body works and how food is actually fuel, which I never really looked at it from that aspect. And I think as a young person, and I think a lot, and by young I mean I was probably in my mid to late 20s before I really started taking it serious. And now that I'm turned 50, I take it very serious.
Yep. The older we get, the more serious it becomes.
Everything I do now revolves around health.
Yeah.
Like, how's it going to make me? For me, it's how's it going to make me feel.
Absolutely.
Like, whatever I'm eating, whatever I'm drinking, whatever I'm spending my money on, large purchases. It's all about how do I make myself feel better. Sure. So that's why I think that I always tell myself, if I knew about this when I was younger, what could I have done? Because I had a pretty good athletic career, and I think these are extra things in my mind that separate good athletes from great athletes. Mm-hmm. Because even the greatest athlete, if your body gives out, it just gives out. There's nothing you can do about it. Right. As good as you are, if you pull a hamstring, if you're not hydrated or whatever the case may be, like, you're out of the game.
Absolutely.
You could be the best player, but you're out.
Yeah.
So in terms of starting it, the first question I would say is, like, how young should athletes really start focusing on the foods that they eat? Like, when should they start that? And what kind of foods should they be preparing for their kids pre-game, post-game, and like snack type stuff? Yeah.
I mean, to your first question, I would say there's not really like a too young, right? I feel like there's been a lot of discussion on what's too young to start weightlifting or things like that. Right. With nutrition, there's really not like a too young. There is a little bit of palate development, right? So younger kids oftentimes have a pretty limited palate, and it expands as they get older. So that's one consideration in terms of, we want to make sure we're giving them things that they'll actually eat versus being like, here's a perfect plate, but they're not going to eat any of it. So there's a fine balance there, but I think it's great to focus on it. The younger, the better. I think if we introduce foods earlier, that's great, just so they have exposure to that. I think starting them young is great. In terms of, like you said, pre, during, post. So typically I recommend trying things out during practices and things like that, just because game day, we never want to try anything brand new, right? So if they hear this and then they're like, let me try it on a game day, I'm like, please don't. Try it on a practice day first, because everybody's different in terms of how they digest things. But typically pre, we definitely want to focus on carbs within that 30 minutes prior to whatever it is, kickoff, anything like that, where we're giving the body a little bit of fast absorbing energy, basically, that's ready to use. So a small snack of, a banana, some grapes, some pretzels, granola bar. That would be the time where I'd say more of a granola bar versus a protein bar. Things like that will get quickly digested, but give them that energy to go on so that they save those energy stores. They last a little bit longer during the game. In terms of like pre-meal, that would be ideally about 3 hours before, and that can be a more balanced meal, but predominantly focusing on carbs with a little bit of protein, a little bit of fat. Obviously, that's going to be a little nuanced if it's like a morning game, right? Like nobody's getting up at 5 a.m. for an 8 a.m.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of general concept for pre.
So then, if they had a choice to be the best that they could do, it would be, because it sounds like the first part they were more like pregame snacks.
Yes.
And then the second part was like an actual meal.
Yes.
So that actual meal would be comprised of if they do have the time for those things, and I'm assuming that that's the better option.
Yeah.
Than the snack, because the snack nowadays, most snacks are they're filled with all kinds of fillers and like different types of lots of ingredients. Sure. I've always been taught, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the least amount of ingredients, the better. Like in your products, like when you're eating things, because you know what's in them.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. To a certain extent, for sure. I would say, the more natural you can go, typically the better. There's definitely a time and a place for things that are a little bit more processed, which is typically around the training time, just because the quicker absorbed, the better. Not to say get something that's super processed, tons of, like you said, fillers in there. Right. You can kind of see what works best for your own body. If it's fruit, great. If it's pretzels, great. Other things like that. But ideally, if we can get both of those in, if we can get both a meal at 3 hours before and a snack before, that's kind of ideal, just because you want to get the full nutrients in 3 hours before. That's enough time to digest a full meal, and then also get that snack to kind of like top off your energy stores. The meal, I would say, if you can get something that's like about half the plate being carbs, and it would be, I would say, probably a little bit more lower fiber carbs. So in that case, I would go more for like bread or maybe a white rice or something like that versus a brown rice, oatmeal, something like that, bagel, things like
something that's going to burn fast.
Correct. Yeah. So you don't want like a ton of fiber or a ton of fat, things that are going to really
take time
slow
to digest.
So about half the plate being something like that, maybe a quarter of the plate being some sort of protein, whether it's eggs, chicken, turkey, something that's a little bit more on the lean side, and then a little bit of fruit, maybe a little bit of fat, something like that. The things we want to really avoid pre-game is anything super fried, super heavy, cream-based, fat-based, things like that, like those cream sauces and pastas. Those things just really slow digestion.
So for the mom or dad that thinks like, oh, well, I need to give him some carbs, then I give him some fettuccine.
Right.
It's probably
fettuccine
not the
Alfredo,
best.
I'm like,
it's probably not the best
maybe
thing.
Spaghetti and meatballs. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And that's funny. That was going to be my next question, was to ask you about, because you just talked about like right before.
Sure.
Like, and that's the thing, is that a lot of times as parents, do you have children?
I don't.
Okay. So as parents, time is always of the essence. No matter how much you plan, how good you are as a planner, things are always going to, it's like, what is that law they call? Whatever can go wrong will go wrong.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? That's being a parent all the time. So as much as you plan for it, it always can mess up.
Sure.
So I guess one of the questions I was going to say was, you say 3 hours prior to, let's just say that for whatever reason, mom has 2 hours
to
get it done. Like, what are the things that she shouldn't have, that you should not give the children, basically, for sure, because this is going to stop them, which is what you just answered.
Sure.
It talks about what not to give them. Because as a parent, I'm always wondering, they have to eat.
Right, absolutely.
But what do I give them? The game's in an hour. We got up late. We're running to the field late.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of bar? So you answered some of those questions, which is good.
Yeah.
In terms of hydration, intra. So during the game.
Yeah.
So my kids play football and soccer, and there's always little breaks. Soccer's less breaks, but football, there's breaks all the time.
Sure.
Is water enough for them to have for hydration? Are electrolyte drinks good for them? Are there supplementation things that are good for them? Like, how important is hydration throughout the game that they're competing in?
Yeah.
What does it affect in their bodies? And what are the best things that we can give them to support their hydration?
Yeah, all great questions. So in terms of importance of hydration, huge. It's, I feel like, a very low-hanging fruit, right? It's like something that's pretty easy to implement, but it can affect a lot of different things in the body. So we start to see performance detriments at as little as 2% of your body weight lost in sweat. So it's a little abstract, but if somebody is, let's say, 100 pounds for easy math, we see that performance detriment as little as 2 pounds of weight loss from sweat during practice, during a game. And typically, right, when we start to get tired, performance drops, that's when we see injury risk increase. So ideally, if we can try to hydrate our bodies as best we can to try to mitigate any type of weight loss through that sweat, the better. There's also a lot of cognitive things that happen in terms of the more dehydrated we are, the more basically our brain kind of turns off, right? Areas of inactivity in the brain. So thinking, reaction time, ability to remember plays and things like that becomes harder the more dehydrated we get. So definitely super important. The other thing I like to tell people is if you think about your muscles like a dish sponge, and when it's dried out, you haven't used it in a couple of days, it's not very pliable or bendy, versus when it's wet, it's super pliable, bendy, kind of like our muscles, right? So if we're hydrated, lowers the risk of pulling a muscle, versus when we're dehydrated, they become a lot tighter. So not the only factor, obviously. But
so in terms of hydration, like beforehand, I've always been taught you should drink on average half your body weight in ounces. And hydration doesn't start before the game. It starts the day before the game.
Sure.
So can you talk to a little bit about that so parents can understand, like, getting your kid hydrated doesn't mean like, hey, the game's going to start here, drink this.
Right, yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, the best way to stay hydrated is to stay hydrated, right? So ideally, just day in and day out, always trying to remain hydrated. Typically, half of your body weight in ounces per day is like a good starting point. That can go all the way up to your full body weight in ounces. Very dependent on person. Another easy way to monitor, especially for kids if they're not taking multivitamins or something like that, then urine color is a really good way to monitor.
Clear, better.
Yeah. So if it's like a light lemonade color, it's great. Clear, if they're going to the bathroom like more than once an hour, sometimes that just indicates we might need more electrolytes or sodium to really hydrate the cells and retain some of that fluid versus just excreting it. And then obviously if it's closer to like a dark yellow apple juice color, definitely need more water.
Right.
So that's an easy way. But yeah, ideally if we can get that baseline goal every single day, and then we kind of build on top of that with the training. So that's kind of the half your body weight in ounces is typically like with no exercise.
Right. Just to sustain good hydration.
Yeah, just on a daily basis.
So for the athlete, we're adding what to that? Like, what are things that they can add to that for the athlete, and when?
Yeah, so ideally that would be outside of the training time, right? You're getting that amount of water outside. There are different fluids that will add to that, right? A lot of people think that other fluids don't count, but they definitely do.
That was always a question of mine. So like when I was dealing with hydration, they're like, I have to drink a gallon a day.
Right.
And so I'm like, of just water?
Right.
Well, I just had my tea and I mixed it with water. Does that 32 ounces count?
Totally.
Okay.
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
Good to know.
Yeah. Even beverages that are considered a diuretic, right? Like most children aren't drinking coffee, but as we get older, coffee is a diuretic, but it doesn't, if you're drinking 8 ounces of coffee, you're not going to then excrete exactly 8 ounces, right? So there is a little bit of, maybe we're not getting the full 8 ounces, but maybe we're getting 6, right?
But still, some of it counts. I was under the impression, and when I was doing that, I was drinking all these different like sports drinks and these teas, and then I would have my water, and I'm like, this is too much liquid. 100%. I'm like a pregnant woman in the bathroom all the time.
Yeah, and then you just have to go all the time. You're like, what's happening?
That's exactly how I felt.
Yeah, absolutely. Those other things do count. Ideally, we want to focus mainly on water throughout the day, but then we can add in, especially for kids, like juices and things like that are fine. Ideally, limiting things like sodas and things like that. But then during training or a game or anything like that, that's where we really want to focus on adding extra fluids in, and then we can get specific with what we're adding. So water is typically just fine if they're exercising for less than 45 minutes at a time. So maybe they're having a shorter practice or it's something supplemental, right? So 45 minutes or less, totally fine, just water. Anytime we go over that 45-minute mark is typically when we do want to start considering electrolytes, maybe some carb additions. So electrolytes, definitely want to add those. You can use, there's tons of them on the market, right? And a lot of times some are advertised as electrolytes that I wouldn't really consider an electrolyte. But popular ones that I feel like are on the market right now that are great are Liquid IV, Noon, Elements becoming a lot more popular. That one's a lot higher sodium. So Liquid IV is around 500 milligrams of sodium versus Elements more like 1,000. So lots of those different packets you can mix into water. Right. And most of those are predominantly electrolytes. So mostly sodium. That's the one that comes out in our sweat in greater amounts. Typically, we can replace the other electrolytes through our food just fine. So we don't have to have an extra focus on those. But if we go above about 90 minutes of exercise, that's when we do want to add a little bit of carbohydrates as well, just to help to replenish the energy stores as well as to really like drive the fluid into the cells. So when we think about hydration, we think that water follows salt and salt follows sugar into a cell. So to truly hydrate the cells, we do ideally need all three to really drive that fluid into the cells. So that's why a lot of electrolyte beverages will have a little bit of carbs in there. That helps with the hydration. And then there are things like sports drinks, right? So you have the electrolytes that typically electrolytes are mainly just sodium replacement. Then you have sports drinks, which now there's so many, right? There's, I mean, even just in one brand, right? There's like Gatorade and there's Gatorade Thirst Quencher, G2, Gatorade Zero. There's like a million different ones. So we just want to make sure like what are we actually using it for to pick whichever product we're using. So if it's 45 minutes to 90 minutes, we can just do an electrolyte replacement. That's any of the ones I named, or like a Gatorade Zero, right? Where it's going to have the electrolytes but not the carbohydrates. If we're going above that 90-minute mark, then we do want to ideally add a little bit of carbs, which in a soccer game, right, that's usually where the oranges at halftime come and play. Right. We can add those in that way. That's totally fine to do. Those applesauce pouches are great.
Yeah, I see a lot of the girls, just recently at the game, it was like the second half, and, you know, mom runs over and you just see the girl like squeezing it in her mouth,
yeah. It's like,
really fast, and then running back on the field. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, those are great. They're just simple carbs, right, just to give you a little energy, and they're a more natural source, right? So if somebody doesn't want to use like a Gatorade Thirst Quencher, which a lot of people say like so high in sugar, which if you're sitting at a desk at school all day, absolutely probably don't need that. It's better to get it through natural sources and things like that. But the Thirst Quencher one is formulated in amounts that have been shown to increase your energy levels without being too high where it causes GI distress. Because sometimes if we were to do like a orange juice or something during a match and it's a larger amount, sometimes it's too concentrated of a carbohydrate source, and that's when we get GI issues of like now we have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the game or something like that, or we get a side cramp or something doesn't feel very good. So typically we want about something that's about 10 to 18 grams per cup of fluid for our carbohydrate intake. So that's where Gatorade is calculated in that amount, or like an applesauce, half a banana, some orange slices, something like that would help.
I'm hearing all this great information, which I like because I'm a geek on stuff like that. Like I geek out, like I'm going to rewatch this thing and look stuff up.
Sure.
But the average mom or dad, like they want to know like what's simple for me. What can I just have in the bag in case my kid needs it during the game, or, you know, pre-planning for soccer. My daughter's not little anymore. She's going to college next year or this year. So when she was little, you know, you could plan more for it. Now she has her own routine of what she has. She has her 2 drinks. She has her sports performance drink, and she has her water. So she's good. But for the average mom or dad, like what are some staples that they can have in their bag or on them to make sure that they don't have to worry so much about, well, is it only 20 minutes we're playing? Is it 40 minutes we're playing? Like what's a general say grocery list of things that they can have with them to make sure that their kid is ready to perform at their best?
So I would say, like, obviously water is a big one. In terms of electrolytes, it's a little bit more personal preference, but I would say like Liquid IV is a really easily accessible one. You can get at most grocery stores. So that's a good electrolyte one if you're not wanting to use like a Gatorade. And then things like those fig bars. There's like the Nature's Bakery, I think, is one of them. Fig bars are super easy. Granola bars, the Nutri-Grain bars, the Chewy bars, which I think Trader Joe's has a version of their Chewy bars, right? Those are great. Easy things that you can keep in a bag too if they don't eat them. Pretzels are another easy one. And then any type of fruit too, that's a little bit more perishable, right? So that's one you have to remember to take in and out of the bag. But all of those things are things that can just live in the bag and just stay there. Just in case if they need them, and things like that.
Well, that's good to know, because I'm always I'm always thinking from our perspective, like we fuel our kids before we leave, but obviously like the younger they are, and depending upon the sport, is how long their game's going to be or how long their day's going to be. Our young daughter played soccer or plays soccer, and I remember days where she would have 2 games in a day, which at that age, not that crazy. Now it would be crazy because they're running at such, high speeds and more power and more risk of injury. But back then, if you have like, let's say you have people that have, now it's like soccer, could be baseball, could be softball, could be all these different sports where they have multiple games in a day. Fueling in between those, the biggest thing we found is sometimes, as a team, we go to eat before our second game. Well, some games we'd come back and like, what the heck just happened? And I knew because I didn't have my daughter eat all these heavy types of foods, knowing she's going to have to come back. What are some good things to stay away from? Like from those in-between meals, like what you have 4 or 5 hours in between a game is what usually what the time is. Like what are good do's and don'ts for parents that have athletes that are playing multiple games in a day that they don't feed them the wrong stuff in between?
So that's a big one where I tell, a lot of athletes are like, well, I'm burning it off, right? Or they don't think about it. And I'm like, this would be the day, like have that stuff the day after, right? That's totally fine to have that stuff sometimes. But day of, if you do have that 4 to 5 hours, something like a sandwich with like pretzels on the side instead of chips, right? And the sandwich should be more like turkey, chicken, maybe like roast beef, ham, something that's a little bit leaner. And then it's the sauces we want to be mindful of, right? So something light like mustard, light mayonnaise, a little bit of hummus or guacamole or whatever spread they're putting on there is fine. But we want to avoid the ones that are like doused in that, that fat type of sauce. That will slow down digestion quite a bit, especially if we're adding then cheese on the sandwich. So we really want to just minimize the amount of slow digesting foods, which a lot of times are fat and fiber, right? Those are the biggest ones that slow down digestion, which normally is a great thing. We want to do that. But on those game days, we want to kind of avoid that. So anything fried, so potato chips, French fries, even like chicken tenders, right? That would be a day.
That's like the go-to meal for every kid.
Right.
My daughter's 17, still wants chicken fingers.
Oh yeah, which I'm like, great, have it after the second game. Like if you're going Chick-fil-A, right? They have a grilled chicken sandwich. That would be a day where I'm like, get the grilled chicken sandwich, don't get the fries, maybe add some, like throw some pretzels in there or have, one of those bars that you threw in the bag. And then after the game would be more, okay, if you want the fried chicken, it might delay recovery just slightly, but at that age, it's okay. So avoiding a lot of those things. If you are going anything pasta based, right, we want to avoid the cream sauces. We want to go more for a red sauce. I'm trying to think of other common things. Like potato salads are typically fine. They're a little bit lighter than like a macaroni salad. It's going to be a little bit more cream in there. So any of those things, we would just want to be mindful of how much fat and fiber we're adding and go a little bit more for easily digestible things.
So one of the go-to meals for parents, which is the easiest and usually one of the most inexpensive, is pizza. So how does pizza score? I mean, we're breaking it down into the macronutrients of what is there. Like, can you explain what's on the basic cheese pepperoni pizza? Like, so they understand how that helps or hinders the performance?
So pizza essentially is, bread, which is a carbohydrate, some tomato sauce, also a carbohydrate, and then quite a bit of cheese, which is mostly fat. And then pepperoni, it technically is a protein, right? But it's a little bit on the higher fat side of protein. So essentially you're getting carbs and fat. So a lot of times it's a little bit too high in fat for an in-between type of meal. After, totally fine. I would say maybe throw on like some chicken, right? Maybe it's a barbecue chicken pizza. So you get a little bit extra of that leaner protein. But in between, typically a little bit too high of fat because of the volume of cheese. Something like a sandwich, right? You're just getting a slice or two of cheese on there. Totally fine. But pizza typically is going to slow down that digestion. It's also any type of animal-based fat is typically the type of fat in there is a little bit more pro-inflammatory. So it inflames the body a little bit more, and so it can delay recovery time. So a lot of times in between games too, that will add to the inflammation that we're already getting some inflammation from exercise, which in an acute sense, it's not a bad thing,
Right.
but we want to make sure we're not piling inflammation on top of inflammation on top of inflammation.
Right.
The body perceives that as kind of a stressor. So if we can go more for those anti-inflammatory types of foods and very like plain types of things, then it helps with that digestion and recovery process a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those are good. Those are good things.
Yeah.
So we talked about the pre. We talked about the intra. Now let's talk a little bit about the post.
Yes.
I've always been taught that you should get a decent amount of protein in your body, 20 to 40 grams of protein. And I'd also like to know your take on how much protein is too much protein. Because a lot of times people are like, well, this is a 60 protein. Like my son came the other day into the room. He's 14 and he's building muscle now. We're working out, so he's eating a lot. And so like we're trying to feed him for gains.
Yeah.
And he came in with this ridiculous shake and he's like, I want to make this shake. And I looked at the macros on it. And I'm like, dude, this is like 1,200 calories. It's like 70 grams of protein. Like, your body's not going to digest all that protein. It's going to turn it into other stuff.
Correct.
So I think so that people can understand how the body works when it breaks down those macronutrients.
Yeah.
Like post-recovery, they just got done playing. What does their body need to replenish the muscles to make sure they're not losing that muscle, to make sure that they're replenishing everything they need in terms of their proteins, their fats, good carbs, that type of stuff. What do you recommend, and how soon after do you recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of amount, typically the amount of overall protein you can take in throughout the course of a day, as well as one time, is typically based on body weight, right? So younger, littler sized kids are going to be able to tolerate a smaller amount than as we get older. If you're, a senior in high school and you're a football player and you're a lot bigger, you're going to be able to digest more. Typically, I would say it's between 15 grams all the way up to maybe 60 if we're talking about like an adult football player, right? Yeah.
A giant guy.
So yeah, a little bit on the bigger end of things. That's kind of what we can optimally intake at one time to have it actually truly go towards repairing and rebuilding muscles versus, like you said, getting turned into other things.
Is there a percentage? Like, so you have a 126-pound kid, like at post, what's roughly where he's going to be? I get like a 250-pound or a 300-pound guy can probably take that 60 grams.
Yeah.
But, is there like a ratio that someone can kind of figure, okay, my kid's kind of this size, this is roughly what they should take?
Yeah. The math's a little bit strange, but the way we typically do it is we do 0.3 grams per kilogram of body weight gives us the amount of protein for the max like muscle building effect post workout. So kilograms are going to be different. You have to, you can do that conversion online pretty easily. You can just go, if my kid's, 110 pounds, what's their weight in kilograms? And then you just multiply that by 0.3 to get roughly if it's at 15, if it's 20, if it's closer to 30.
Good. So it's good for the parent can figure out roughly for their child what they should be in that ballpark.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Typically, if they're under 100 pounds, they're, 15 grams of protein is great. If they're between, 100 and 160, probably in that 20 to 30 range. If they're over 160, definitely 200 pounds, then we want to go closer to that 40 grams.
And that's in that one meal.
Correct. Yeah. So post-training, post-game, whatever it is, to make sure that we're recovering, if you're going straight to a meal, great. You're probably going to get everything you need with that, in terms of amounts of proteins, carbs, fats. That's great. If you're not going straight to a meal, typically I do recommend having some sort of snack that's going to jumpstart that recovery process. And the kind of minimum we need is that amount of protein that I just said. So that minimum, either 15 up to whatever 60 grams. And then we ideally want to get double, if not triple, that amount in carbohydrates to help recover. Post-exercise, the body's first priority is typically to replace the energy stores in our muscles. And then the second priority is really to repair and rebuild the muscle. So if we miss out on those carbs, it's kind of a common thing that I see is everybody talks about the anabolic window and we need to get protein in. But a lot of people skip the carbohydrates, right? So you get like this protein shake in and you're like, great, I just got 60 grams of protein and like 5 grams of carbs. The body's actually going to take some of that protein, right?
Because it's switch it up and make it into a carb.
Exactly.
And I think that's what a lot of people, they don't understand is that the body's amazing. It's going to do whatever it needs to do to get whatever it needs to get.
Right.
So if you feed it that way, it's easier for the body to deal with it. They don't have to do anything. But if you don't feed it that way, it's going to change it.
For
and
sure.
when I learned that at first, I was like, oh, that's amazing. But it makes sense because then you're realizing, okay, well, if I'm much more specific with what I'm putting into my body, the results I'm going to get are going to be much more of what I'm looking for. Like I'm able to hit my target, as opposed to kind of throwing spaghetti on the wall, so to speak, and seeing what sticks.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no pun intended with
exactly.
Yeah,
but
yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of times it's really nice to think about our body's going to do what it needs to do no matter what we do to it, right? Like the body is going to be like, I got you, I'll figure it out. But the more we can help it to do what it actually wants to do, the more it frees up energy and space for it to focus on other things, right? Versus it being like, okay, dang it, she gave me like the wrong things again. Let me turn everything into, and it focuses on, let me kind of correct what I was just given, and it shuttles things here and shuttles things there. If you give it what it actually needs, then it's like, great, let me just handle that real quick, and then I can go back to doing all of these other things. It
makes it much more efficient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful thing. When I started realizing how to fuel my body, like my results, and at the time I was in my late 20s.
Yeah.
And no, actually, I was in my 30s when I really started to learn about nutrition and take it serious. My body, I was able to perform at much higher levels for much longer periods of time.
Yeah.
So it was exciting. Mind you, my window for what I was trying to achieve in my sports career was gone.
Sure, yeah.
It was long gone.
Yeah.
But I was still excited that I had control over how I felt. And I was still an athlete. I still was participating in sports yearly, going, like, I wasn't getting paid for it or anything, but I was paying. At that point, there comes a point where you're no longer striving to get paid. Yeah. You're not willing to pay to play the sport that you want to pay to play. And that's where I was at that time. But having the right nutrition totally changed the game for me. It changed the way that I felt, and I started learning. So that's when I took an interest in nutrition, and I took an interest in supplementation, and I started getting involved in supplementation. That being said, how important is it, and is supplementation for athletes? If you go online now, you see the gamuts of spectrum of, like, you need to just be eating this straight, all foods, natural foods, this, and then there's like, you need to have supplementation to get to where you're trying to go. There's no way around it. There's like a medium. For me, the way I saw it, and please correct the way I'm looking at it from a novice, if I were to get everything my body needs on a daily basis, I would have to eat so many different types of foods that it would be nearly impossible. And I tried a certain diet back in the day, and I was eating tons of natural food. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I was losing weight rapidly because I was eating, I mean, I'm talking like, I probably lost 20 pounds more than I look, my buddy's like, dude, are you sick?
Yeah.
Because you don't look good. And I was like, no, man, I'm eating all these things. And he's like, you need to stop because you're losing weight. And the reason why is because when you eat the right stuff, it's not very high in terms of calories.
100%.
Like, so protein, super low in calories, right? All those things are low in calories. So if you're eating those right things, it's hard to get everything that you need for your body, mineral-wise, the micronutrients, all those things, which I think people don't really look at. Most people are so fixated on fats, carbs, and proteins. They're just the macronutrients. They don't look at all of the vitamins, minerals, nutrients your body needs to survive that you need to replenish every single day. I always found that supplementation is indeed necessary to supplement those things you're not getting in your daily routine. So in terms of supplementation, what are some things that parents should be trying to create for their kids to have on a regular basis so that way they're filling in the gaps of the things that they're not getting them with their regular foods, which they're actually feeding their kids, right? There's going to be gaps.
Sure. Yeah, always. Yeah, I mean, I think you made a couple really good points in terms of whole foods, right? Those are a lot more nutrient dense. They have a lot more of those vitamins and minerals, but not a ton of calories versus you go the opposite extreme, you get the more calorie dense processed foods are lacking a lot of those nutrients, right? But you can get a lot of calories from things pretty easily. So I think there's a balance. A lot of times people can go on the extremes, right? People can go full processed food diet type of thing, and they're really lacking a lot of those nutrients. Or we can sometimes swing the other way, which we see a lot in the fitness world, right? Where people are so focused on clean eating, and they'll meal prep the exact same thing week after week, right? And they're like, but I'm eating super clean and I'm hitting my macros. But because there's not variety, they're missing a ton of those vitamins and minerals. And you're probably commonly missing the same ones if you're eating the same things over and over again. So I think variety is super important. And I think, in the States especially, there's a lot of fear around our food in general because there is so much, processing. There's things that sneak in. So I think just being mindful of balance, moderation. Again, your body's going to do what it needs to do with everything in terms of if you're putting in something that's more processed with chemicals, like it's okay. We can still, be okay with including a lot of different things. But yes, if we are, especially people that train and expend a lot more energy, a lot of times it's hard to get those micronutrients through just normal foods. So multivitamins are a really easy way to just make sure we're covering our bases. Multivitamins will give you usually a lower dose of all the different vitamins and minerals. So if you're missing out on something, it will at least fill that in. So that's a really easy one. There's a lot that are formulated, for children, then there's adults, and then you can split it once you're an adult into males and females, and they're formulated in different ways, but it'll at least give you a minimum amount of all the different things you need. And then from there, I would say like a lot of other things that are more specific. So we typically don't want to blindly supplement single ingredient things. So we don't want to blindly supplement female athletes with iron if they're not actually low in iron, because we can get to too high of levels and things like that. So we want to make sure if there's, if they're doing an annual physical where they're getting some sort of testing, that will usually give us a good indication if there is things of concern like low iron, low vitamin D, things like that we can definitely correct with supplements. But a multivitamin is a pretty safe way to make sure you're getting a little bit of everything that you need without going too high on anything.
So that brings me to a point where we're talking about specificity in the individual. Every person is obviously different. Now, we're made up of the same things, but some people are born with their bodies react differently to different types of stuff. Is there anything, and this is probably not something obviously you want to do with a young child because, they're small and, and we're just trying to get them to create good, healthy eating habits.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as they get older and you start getting these athletes that are wanting to perform at high levels, are there things that parents can do? And again, I see lots of stuff online, and I've seen it so much now that I understand it's more of a sales gimmicky thing than it is something that may be necessary. But is there things that your kids can test for to say, okay, hey, my specific son or daughter did this kind of blood work and checked on this, and this is kind of what their issues are, so I can get more specific. Oh, maybe that's not a good thing for her to eat because her body doesn't react well to that. But I'm just talking about a specific thing for a child, but I'm trying to phrase it in a way where, because I want it to be general, you know what I mean? Like a general thing that parents can look for, but it does deal with the specificity of the child. So it's kind of like an oxymoron. You know what I'm saying? But you know what I'm trying to say?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I would say, blood work's definitely a good one, just because if everything is in normal range, that's a good indication that they probably are getting most everything that they need. Things that sometimes will trigger it is obviously the low iron, low vitamin D. Sometimes if certain numbers in the complete blood cell count is off, sometimes that's an indication of maybe a B vitamin deficiency. So there's different kind of triggers we can look for in the labs that will help with that. The other one would be to consider if the child has a food allergy or has anything that they're restricting the food intake, right? So if they're lactose intolerant and there's all dairy is eliminated, obviously that's totally fine if they're lactose intolerant. Then we just want to make sure, typically that's where we get our calcium from. So are we supplementing with foods that have, fortified with calcium? Most, plant-based milks are, just because they know that that's usually a replacement. But if they don't like that and they're not eating a lot of like calcium-rich foods, then that might be something where we're supplementing. Yep. Same with like somebody with celiac or that's gluten intolerant. A lot of times, a lot of our grains have a lot of our B vitamins and things like that. So if we're really, restricting the grain food group, then we want to look at maybe B vitamins. Vegan, vegetarian, that would be another one to consider. Protein levels, B vitamins, especially vegan athletes, the B12 is a big concern for that one. So if we're eliminating anything from the diet altogether, that's when we can get a little bit more general but specific, right? Where we're eliminating this whole food group, so we want to make sure that we're getting enough of what that food group would provide in terms of micronutrients.
So you really need to understand whatever you're pulling out, it has a natural balance of nutrients that it's providing.
Correct.
And if you're taking it out of the person's diet, you need to figure out how to replace it.
Right.
And that can be through other types of foods, or it can be through supplementation.
Right, exactly.
So this is the part that always gets me, is that as a parent, you're like, I don't want to think about all that. So much stuff to think about.
Right.
But honestly, when you're dealing with athletes in general, just we're talking, even if you're talking about just your regular kids that are just, they love other things other than athletics. That doesn't take a lot of energy expenditure. They don't have to eat. They don't have to be as specific about their food as, say, an athlete would, just because of the what's going to be placed on their bodies in terms of performance. But it seems like so much. And for somebody that's serious, I think parents need to really understand that if you're serious about your athlete being the best athlete that they can be, like for me, the foundation where everything starts is nutrition.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's how do they feel when they're on the field.
Yeah.
You could have, just like I said before, you can have the best skill sets that anybody has in your sport. Like, this person is amazing. Their first touch is this, they can do this.
Right.
But when you pull a hamstring because you're not hydrated, when you're fatigued or you're tired and you blow an ACL because your body doesn't have what it needs to perform, none of that stuff matters.
Right.
It's all irrelevant.
Yeah.
So that being said, what are some foundational habits that parents can start with their kids? And I'm sure your answer is going to be all kids should start with these habits because it's good for everybody, right?
Sure.
But athletes in general, what are the things that they need to be doing habitually, that like brushing their teeth is what they need to be doing every single day, and start them as young as possible so that way it just becomes a normal thing for them and they don't know any better, and they're going to be the wiser for it as they get into their athletics.
Sure. Yeah. That's a really good question. I think first and foremost is making sure that they're actually eating all throughout the day. A lot of times, especially as they get older and busier, right? I see a lot of times, they don't have breakfast, or they grab a bar on the way out the door, and then they might not like the school lunch, so they skip that, right? And then they're going into a practice at 3 p.m. and I'm like, what did you eat all day? And they're like, I had a bar at 8 a.m. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, that's not enough. So I think first and foremost, establishing those habits of, do we need to prep something the night before, and getting the kid involved too, right? I think a lot of times parents want to provide so much for their kids, which is amazing. And I think it becomes overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times parents don't have a lot of time. They're just doing all the things. And so, putting it on them a little bit of getting them in the habit of okay, what are we doing for breakfast tomorrow? Do we need to do any prep the night before for it? Or are there things that we can have that are easy to grab and go, right? So something like an Uncrustable and a chocolate milk, right? That could be a pretty easy pairing. It's not perfect, right? But it's going to at least be better than nothing or just a bar or something like that. So at least having foods that we can pair together, a protein bar, a banana, and a string cheese, right? So pairing things together or getting them involved in prepping that. So I think bare minimum, making sure that they're having breakfast. Ideally, if they can bring a snack for that morning time, great. Lunch for sure. So getting those, and then most of the practices are typically either after school or they're into the evening. So ideally, if we can bookend the practice as well, right? So having that pre-practice snack, post-practice snack if we're not going straight into a meal, and then having that dinner meal or whatever it is. So ideally, if we can fuel every 3 to 4 hours, that's going to be kind of the best thing for them in terms of getting them into the habit of doing that. And sometimes it does take every year, every semester, sitting down and being let's look at this schedule.
Reassessing, exactly.
Yeah, and let's figure out, okay, if the practice time moved, it used to be at 3 and we had that down, and now it's moved to, now it's at 7 p.m. because you're playing club or whatever it is. How are we re-strategizing? I think that's what I do a lot with high school students and younger kids is what time is your practice and how can we work that? If it's a 7 p.m. practice, most likely you're probably eating dinner before, right? And then so that post-practice is just that snack, but we still need to get that in. Right. Versus if the practice is after school, ideally then we need to prepare to bring a snack to school. Probably the after is going to be your dinner, and then maybe have a nighttime snack. So it's just kind of sitting down and figuring out, it's like playing Tetris. Probably kids might not play that anymore, but
you just dated yourself.
Yeah, I did. I know. I'm dang it. Everybody
I
thought
understood exactly what you're talking about.
I know. It's some people, but probably not the kids. The parents will know. But yeah, kind of figuring out okay, where exactly am I putting this fuel in? And then where is that fuel coming from? Is it something I'm prepping ahead of time? Are we eating that out? Are we eating that at school? What snacks do we have to have on hand so that it's probably a little bit longer of a preparation session. But then from there, it's like, okay, here's the things that are normally on the grocery list to kind of live at home. Here's the things maybe weekly that we need to keep replenishing because they're perishable. And then it's a little bit more manageable on the fly when you kind of plan it out a little bit better that way. So I think the consistent eating, the bookending practices, the intra is super important as well, whether you're doing electrolytes, applesauce, whatever that is. I think those are kind of the biggest things as we set that foundation. A lot of times I see people underfueling, right? And I think that's like, if we think about a pyramid in terms of sports nutrition, the foundation of that pyramid is going to be like adequate intake. So just getting enough overall.
Food, right?
If we don't, then the body goes into survival mode, and nothing you do on top of that, whether you're hitting you got the pre, during, post workout, but you didn't get anything from 8 to 3, the body's still going to be like, I just don't have enough to function. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's that planning. Sounds to me like some of the staples are eating regularly throughout the day. Mm-hmm. Obviously trying to plan for the things that you want, for the events that you have throughout the day to make sure you're fueling with the things that you need. Say it's sport, you need more carbohydrates, simple carbs that you can get in to give you that energy that you need. But for the most part, it's like, make sure you have some kind of a plan.
Yes.
Like you should have some kind, and I think that's the biggest thing, is that a lot of times athletes, especially young athletes, they have no plan whatsoever.
Plan.
I never had a plan.
No.
I wouldn't even eat. Like I wouldn't eat anything and go play for like 2 hours.
Oh yeah.
And and then come back and then get a drink, which is the water fountain.
Yeah.
After
totally.
the water fountain, you'd go home and whatever was for dinner was for dinner.
Right.
So I always think about that now as an older guy that's watching and raising young athletes. I'm like, man, that's why we're trying to give them all of that knowledge,
Sure.
so they can utilize that knowledge to become much better than we ever were,
Yeah.
or at least the opportunity
Sure.
to become better. Because who knows what you're going to be? Like nobody knows.
Right.
But if you give yourself the best opportunities, then that's going to be that's all we can do as parents, is give you the best of what we know.
Yeah.
And if we don't know, we find people like you who are knowledgeable.
Absolutely.
And we pick your brain to figure out exactly what are those things. So that all makes a lot of sense. You work with a lot of different types of athletes, you said, from small to professional level. And you're focusing now on how you said you have a lot of high school.
Yeah.
Have you seen, with those changes that you've made, like what kind of incremental changes have you seen in your athletes' performances in terms of just how much better they play, how much better they recover, how much better they feel?
Yeah. It's usually pretty huge, which is awesome. I think, especially at that age, right? I think a lot of times it's helpful to have them still at home versus a lot of my college athletes, they don't have that support there, right? So that's coming from me or coaches or the athletic department, of that accountability piece of like, did you do this? And they're like, oh, I forgot. So when they're in high school, it's nice because they're still at home, so mom and dad can kind of help be like, did you do that? And it might be more on them to own it, but they can still do it. But I think when they do it and the buy-in's there, it's huge. I think I've had athletes that, fatigue halfway through practice or game, and that, halfway through, they're just like, I just run out of steam. I hit the wall. I can't even, it's just like, I'm basically done with practice halfway through.
Yeah.
That's usually pretty easily correctable, right? So that's been something that's flipped, and that usually we'll see that one correct in like a week, right? So if they regularly implement some of these changes, a week they're like, oh, I'm great through practice. I can make it all the way through. I've had some people really prone to cramping, right? So they get cramps almost every practice, or at least once a week. That one's pretty, easy to correct as well. Sometimes there's the issue of GI issues during practice, right? They're like, I don't eat before because I feel awful during. And that a lot of times to me is an indication of we either did the wrong amount or the wrong types of food before. So then it's just kind of like, figuring out what actually works and implementing that. And that usually helps a lot too, because that will, again, increase those energy levels. Recovery time, I would say at that age, is probably the thing that I feel like they notice the least, because they're so young. The recovery,
they're not paying attention.
The recovery,
and
they're just like,
for days,
what do you mean recovery? I don't even know what that means. Like, I just feel fine all the time. And you're like, that's so nice for you.
I know. I remember that.
Yeah, right? So that is a piece I feel like does come a little bit later. But the energy levels, the cramping, like all of that stuff is pretty extreme and pretty quick, which is nice.
So if they just implement what it is that these nutritional habits, they're going to feel it really quickly, especially the young ones. Because like you said, like they're never tired. Like the next day, for me, if I go play on a Sunday,
Sure.
I'll be regular on Thursday.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And
days later.
And mind you, I'll be doing the foam rolling. I'll be
Sure.
doing all the stuff that I need to do.
Oh, yeah.
But for my body to feel like it did on Sunday,
Sure.
it takes me 3 or 4 days to get back to there. But then again,
Yeah.
I'm 50 years old with 50-year-old joints and ligaments and muscles and stuff like that.
Right.
Whereas when you're younger, you just have so much energy. The next day, you're like, oh, yeah, I'm a little sore.
Yeah.
Then you
Yeah,
need to
feel
stretch
it a little
out. Then
bit.
you need
Yeah.
to do anything.
Yeah.
In terms of your higher level athletes,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say that all of those higher level athletes really have in common when it comes to their nutrition?
That's a great question. I feel like currently, and I think things ebb and flow as the trends ebb and flow, right? I feel like, when I was really little, it was like a low fat craze, and then it turned into low carb. And so I think those things
Right.
obviously play a role. But a lot of my, like professional athletes, it's a big misunderstanding about carbohydrates before and during exercise, and like the fact that we really do need those. And I do think, like a misunderstanding of what sports drinks are formulated for. A lot of people have really demonized sports drinks, which I totally get. Because
We're in that phase.
If you're drinking that all day.
Yeah, we're in that phase in social media right now where everything is nitpicked. Every ingredient that you have on there, they don't know the formulation or why they put that in there or whatnot. Because, there's people that are running businesses where they're trying to, when you make something, it's not like farmer's market.
Right.
Where I make it and I'm like, here, you buy it. I just made it. I just got it off the farm and you're eating it now.
Right.
No, it's going to sit for a minute. So there are certain things that have to be done. Mind you, there are better choices than other. But I think you're right. It's like we're in that phase right now where people are super nitpicky about every single ingredient.
Right.
And you realize, I always tell people, because I work in supplements as well, I'm like, all the stuff that you want to have, put that together, take out all that other stuff and see what it tastes like.
Right.
Your palate will not support it. You'll be doing this as you drink it or whatever the case, right? It's like there has to be a bit of a give and take.
Absolutely.
And that's okay. But what I always tell people is 9 times out of 10, the stuff that you're drinking that is by a health company that's creating that product is better than what you're guessing to put in your body.
Right.
Like, let's just take out whatever might be in it that's probably not the best choice. It's better than whatever you're not eating.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's where the fear comes in, right? A lot of times, even my high-level athletes, they are afraid to eat too much before, and then they're afraid of Gatorade, so then they don't have that during. And then by the time, they're not super hungry after practice because then it's hot and they just train and they're like, I'm not really hungry. So maybe they'll have, if we're lucky, a protein shake. And then they get to dinner and they're like, yeah, then I just had my whole day's worth of calories
in
from
one sitting.
3 to 9 p.m., right? Yeah. So you're like, that's not ideal. So I think that's a big one that I see all the way up to professional level, is that fear of like before and during the workout. And then it's just this backloaded situation where if we can give the body more earlier, it does send a signal to the brain of, okay, I have enough nutrition to handle the stress of that training. And so it actually it's a little easier to monitor what you're actually putting into your body later in the day and have control over that, because the brain has a signal that it's been fed and can handle that stressor better, versus underfueling the first half of the day. And then the brain's kind of like, now I'm in survival mode. You added an extra stressor, and now I'm going to send you signals of like, I need everything right now.
Right.
And that's where that
is that craving?
Part.
Is that basically
Absolutely,
craving? It sounded like you just described cravings.
Yes, 100%. Because people are like, people think it's willpower, or like, I don't have discipline. Like, why can this person do it and I just can't do it? And I'm like, it's not a willpower thing. You're not disciplined. It's usually the brain, once you underfuel enough, it literally turns the rational part of your brain off. And so that willpower and rational thinking is literally offline. So you're just in survival mode, essentially, where you're
Give me anything.
I just want the thing that I want, and I'm going to have it, and no amount of discipline.
That makes a lot more sense from a logical standpoint than I believe that there is a certain amount of willpower in things.
Sure.
But when it's a chemical reaction, which is really what's going on in your body, all these chemical reactions, it makes a lot more sense.
Sure. Yeah.
That your body just needs something because you haven't given it anything, and whatever you take, it's going to want more, which is why you probably binge on the things that you're eating, because you're just like, give me more. Like the brain's like, I want more.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. Yeah. You put that into a cycle too, and then you have that loop of like, the sugar is a little bit more addicting, and then that loop goes on. And
well, if you compound that over time, because that's what usually happens. Like we deal with a lot of people that are dealing with weight loss.
Sure.
And I'm like, you didn't gain 30 or 40 pounds in a month.
Correct.
Or in a week or in a meal.
Right.
We break it down to a meal. Like this whole meal, like let's just say I just lost it and I went and I just gorged myself.
Sure.
Well, that's not good.
Right.
But that's not going to gain all that weight. Like
Right.
your body's going to burn off a lot of that and you're going to retain some of that as fat because you ate extra, but it's not going to gain 30 pounds.
Sure.
But if you do that incrementally, day after day after day, month after month, year after year, that's how you get from where you are to where you've gotten to.
Yeah.
And so to reverse that, we have to go backwards.
Yep.
And we have to change those habits, and we incrementally are taking off little by little by little by little.
Right.
And before you know it, you go from 200 pounds to 160 pounds, which is where you should have been.
Right.
But it took time.
Totally.
So I think a lot of times people really need to understand is that there's a process.
Yeah.
Nothing is fast. And today we live in a society where everything is like, I want it now. What is that pill that you're selling on TikTok that says if I just take this pill,
and
I'm going to lose. I don't got to do exercise.
Yeah.
I don't have to do nothing. I can still eat all my favorite foods. I literally have seen commercials that are like, you can still eat all of your favorite foods. And just take this whatever miracle elixir. And it's like, we're back to snake oil salesmen in the early 1700s. You know, it's like, just take this and you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
You just described for your athletes kind of like what I would call an accidental fast. Like they're fasting, and I've fasted for 2 years on a 16/8.
Okay. Yeah.
Scale, time frame.
Yeah.
So fasting for 16, sometimes 20, 24. And for me, initially it felt great, but then I felt like it kind of damaged my metabolism because then I wasn't as I was myself. So for athletes, like fasting is a thing. You always say there's trends.
Sure.
And it's one of those things that's kind of, it's not as heavy as it was maybe 6 months ago, but it is still there.
Sure.
In terms of athletes, should they ever be fasting? Because it sounds like they should never be fasting. They should always be having some types of foods in their body at all times of the day while they're awake.
Ideally, yeah. Especially females, right? There's a ton of new research coming out on female athletes versus male athletes. They're not the same, right?
Yeah.
So for females especially, it's extra damaging actually to our systems too fast because our bodies perceive it as an extra stressor, right? So essentially, we stay in a breakdown state longer. So if we fast for longer, your body just continues to break down, so it's harder for us to actually build and maintain muscle and things like that. So extra damaging for females, but for males also a lot of times with male athletes, I see it's hard enough for them to get everything that they need already eating in a whole day, right? So then you shrink that window and there's no way that they're going to get everything they need. And then we talk about that, max amount that you can optimally absorb at one time.
Right. It's like a perfect storm for no results.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what I found. Like you initially, when you're not eating for a long period of time, your body's burning more. It's using the fat that it has, which is the energy source that it has on site. So it's using that. But at some point, like then you're putting all that back on in your 8 hours to eat.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it's like
That's how it felt.
It's like an overload to the body, and it's like, what is happening? Yeah, definitely. So I feel, especially for kids, I feel like never.
Yeah, never.
All the way through high school, even college, I'm like, there's just absolutely no need. Adults becomes a little bit more nuanced, right? But again, females, anybody before menopause, right? Post-menopause, females, in terms of hormones, become a little bit more similar to males. And so the results of fasting can be a slightly different at that point.
Right.
But yeah, I would say for males, there's definitely some research that shows some positive benefits to fasting. I don't think it needs to be a lifestyle or an all the time thing, especially if you start feeling the way that you just described.
I felt like it took my body into a different place of where I used to be able to get right back on track, within a 4 to 6 week period, which is not long.
Sure.
You just go back, recorrect the things you're eating. I know I'm eating bad stuff. Let me get rid of those things.
Sure.
And get back in the gym more consistently, get my card, like just do all the things you normally would do and then start to get the results you usually had.
Yeah.
But what I found was when it was, I think it was because it was such a prolonged period of time.
Sure.
And I was like, I got to stop this. It was kind of like the opposite of what I did when I was eating just those whole foods and was dropping all that weight.
Yeah.
Saying that, it kind of sounds like any of these things that you do to an extreme are going to have an extreme consequence.
100%. Yeah.
So that balance. So that being said, what do you think for parents to give their kids to make sure they're creating, like, what would you give them, your number one advice to have the best of all worlds for your child to build the habits and athletes? Like, give them a recipe. This is your day. This is what it should consist of. Obviously, minus the things we talked about for sport, because those are things that are specific, and we've already addressed those things. But just every day, you should be having these types of things, eating this kind of intervals. Like, what is ideal?
Yeah. So ideally, eating every like 3 to 4 hours, super helpful. Eating within 60 to 90 minutes of waking up. That's a big one too, just because, again, the nervous system plays a big role in terms of how our brain functions, all the things, and it can be really dysregulating to our nervous system to not have fuel first thing in the morning. So eating first thing in the morning, again, 60 to 90 minutes, eating every 3 to 4 hours. And then in terms of composition and amounts, ideally, focusing mostly on whole foods, again, outside of that, if you are training, the training window, but focusing on mostly whole foods, but all things in moderation, right? So trying to get variety and not being afraid of different foods, but just being mindful of predominantly whole foods, predominantly focusing on, more plants, lean proteins, things like that. And then the other things can fill in, especially with snacks and things. That's where like protein bars can be really helpful. And then I think, basically ending the day maybe 2 hours before bed. I always hesitate to say that just because sometimes people, their schedule, they don't get dinner right, and now or they trained, they have a night practice, and then it's like, so I should just not eat. And I'm like, no, then absolutely eat. So it's a little bit of a nuance there. Ideally, if you're not training, you had a normal daily schedule, then ideally stopping about 2 hours before you go to bed eating to allow your body to rest and digest. But if you haven't, you miss dinner, right? Still eat dinner, or training, things will throw that off.
Maybe stay up in a little bit longer to let yourself digest.
Right. Yeah. Maybe stay.
Kind of, you just have to adjust.
Up. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's something that I'm sure parents are very used to, but I think kids sometimes need to learn. Like, life is like that, right? You just got to adjust to whatever gets thrown at you.
That's what we call life.
Right. Yeah.
Like, that's like the definition of life, is that you never know what's going to happen.
Never.
You have to be able to prepare for whatever is going to happen. And then sometimes you have to be able to transition on the spot with something you didn't know you were going to do.
Totally.
That's life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think the like you said, with the plan, a lot of times things don't go right. So I think having, always having a bag with snacks in it just in case, or like anytime I go anywhere, I usually have a protein bar or something like in my bag in the car just in case, because you might have a plan to do something and then you don't, and you always want to just make sure you have a backup.
Right. So that was a ton of information. Really, really good information. I think people are going to get a lot of value out of it. The last thing I'd like to end with is myths.
Yes.
What are some myths that you, as a professional dietitian, sports dietitian, that you hear that just drives you crazy? You're probably looking at your phone, watching these things scroll, because as a dietitian, I'm sure your algorithm is filled with nutritional stuff.
So many things.
Right?
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you see that you're just like, oh my God, that's so not like on the right path?
Sure.
And it's just getting so much attention.
Yeah.
Which is the opposite of good.
Sure. Yeah, very true. Yeah. So I think we actually covered probably two of them. So the fasting one is a big one. The only protein post-workout is another big one. So like just fear of carbs in general. I think another one, it's kind of somewhat faded off, but the alkaline water was one where I'm like, your body literally does that for you. So you don't need to actually purchase something that does that. So that's a big one. Like any type of cleanse, juice fast. I think what's the one that's lemon juice, cayenne, and maple syrup or something that's still around? It was a thing a while ago, and I still see it where it's like the master cleanse. I'm like, please don't, please don't do that. Yeah, so any type of cleanse, again, like your body does that for you. Like your body will detoxify, it will cleanse for you. There's definitely times where, kind of like you said, you went a little farther this way, so we got to like clean it up a little bit to help your body, but your body will do that for you. So those ones, I'm trying to think of any other ones. Oh, coconut oil was a big one for a while where everybody's like, have as much coconut oil as you can in your diet. And I'm like, definitely not also. But a lot of times, yeah, people think it's a plant-based oil. It's great. Anything plant-based is good. That one's actually a saturated fat because it's solid at room temperature. So it's a little bit more pro-inflammatory. There are some plant aspects to it that will do good things in your body too. But the overload of, again, anytime you go to an extreme is
it sounds like these things, there's benefits in them, but they take them to the nth degree.
Yes.
And I can understand it from a marketing standpoint.
Sure.
You're just like, here's it's the secret.
Right.
This person, I see this all the time now. It's like, watch this thing. And as I'm listening to it, I look up and it says sponsored because it's an ad.
Always.
Which I don't have a problem with ad. If your product is great, I'll buy it.
Sure.
But at the same time, like when you're listening, it's the same. It goes in waves. Like it's the same type of gimmicky. You listen carefully. You'll see exactly the secret that they said this was supposed to be. And then you listen to it and then I'm like, oh, I'm in an ad. Like I automatically know, but I'm listening. I'm like, I want to see what it is. I'm curious because I market a lot of things as well. I have a business as well.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what is this? Is this working? I keep seeing it. So if it's working, that means they're paying for it. It means it's probably working.
Absolutely.
So I listen for it, but it seems like they're taking like one small piece of something that may have a kernel of truth to it, and then they're expanding it as to this is the key.
Yes.
And this is the product with that key. And then if you just, then you get to the snake oil salesman type deal.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the U.S. does a very good job of marketing, ploys, anything that's fear-based or extreme in the nutrition world. I feel like it's always my red flag of probably not.
So that being said, would I be correct in assuming that what people should understand is if you just have a consistent plan, like a very bland, simple plan that you do on a regular basis, day after day after day, you're most likely going to find better results than jumping back and forth to the things that you see out there. And I think is that a true statement?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's common sense.
Right.
But sometimes it just needs to be said so that people can understand that there's no shortcut to where you're trying to get to.
Sure.
There's just... I always say, I read this book, It Takes What It Takes. Have you ever heard of that book? Amazing book. Yeah. I think the author passed. I think he passed, but I loved watching him and his philosophy. And that one word, that one phrase, it takes what it takes.
Yeah.
It just solidifies so many different things in terms of nutrition. Like for your body to be healthy, it takes what it takes. Yeah. You may not like it. It may not be the best thing. We all have our vices in foods. Don't get me wrong.
Absolutely.
I love eating different types of foods.
Absolutely.
But in order to get what you want and to have a long, healthy life, the things that you can control, because there's obviously accidents and things that can happen out there. You can't control that, but it's going to take what it takes.
Absolutely.
And it's just that consistency of those things that you talked about. One thing I'd like you to touch on before we finish up is, especially for the young girls.
Yep.
Young girls, and you said it perfectly, like men and women are different. We're just biologically, we're just different.
Yes.
We're built for different purposes. And I always tell my clients, I go, you got to remember, your body wasn't built for performance.
Sure.
Your body was built to have children, and you guys do stuff that our body can't do. So
absolutely.
That you have to understand, like we're not going to say, hey, eat like this, and you're going to shave this much off your hips. Like it's not how it works.
No, not at all. Yeah.
So
correct.
I think the important message I want to get across to young ladies is, the reason why I bring this up is because I have a daughter that's a young lady, and she's going to be a young woman soon, and so I really want the young girls to understand, like, what's the best mentality for them to understand? Like, your body is your body. It's different than other bodies. Don't worry about comparison with other people's bodies. These are the things that you should be focusing on to get the most out of what your body's going to have, and understand that there are differences in everybody.
Sure.
So it could be the difference in terms of your height, your torso height, your leg height. Like, there's all these differences. I want girls to understand that when you're dealing with the nutrition and stuff, like, because sometimes they'll go to extremes to kind of get a result that they think people want.
Sure.
As opposed to, like, what's really important for them. What kind of empowering message can you give them to understand that, like, nutrition can help you get the things you want, but your body is separate and unique from any other person's body.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely tough. I think young girls are in a really tough position with social media and all of the access you have to compare yourself to other things, and then the pressure that society puts on just looking one type of way, right? But I think there's a beauty in the variety of different ways that people can look, right? and the uniqueness there. So I think just really focusing on what your body's doing, right? Like even just like what we had talked about in this talk of like your body's literally going to handle whatever you give it, which is actually amazing that your body will do that. And I think appreciating the differences that females have, appreciating the things that do make us unique in terms of even just the menstrual cycle, right? It's completely different. We have men and women both have the circadian rhythm. Females then also have the monthly rhythm of your cycle, which is actually an indication of health and you fueling your body right. And we have this extra thing that we can pay attention to be like, cool, I think I'm actually doing some things right.
Like a gauge.
Right, yeah. And then I feel like a lot of times, even especially in sports, right, it's almost viewed as like, yeah, I didn't get my period. This is great. Like, I love this. And I'm like, no, that's your body literally telling you like something's wrong.
Right.
Which is actually also really cool, right? You have literally this gauge of like your body's being like, hey, I'm not getting everything that I need. So we're going to shut this process off so that you actually have an indication of like, I'm not getting everything I need. So I think just having a little bit more of an appreciation for the differences that we have as, you know, females and even males, right? But I think having that appreciation, viewing your body more as, you know, being grateful for what it can actually do, the fact that it can train or do whatever you want it to do, versus kind of constantly having that outward comparison. And a lot of times, you know, we may not even be just comparing ourselves to females. It may be like also like, oh, well, that guy has like a 6-pack. And I'm like,
right.
Yeah, like you said, like, we're just not the same.
That's not what he's,
it's not supposed to be. So I think viewing it a little bit differently. And then also I think age-wise, right? I think 16, 17, obviously 10, but like going through puberty, I think is something that isn't really discussed as much in the States. Being a little bit jarring because your body does change so much. And I think sometimes we compare ourselves to what we used to look like literally as a little girl versus also then what people in their late 30s look like, right? Which I don't think there's an understanding of once you hit, you know, a certain age, you actually have to really try to retain muscle. You just naturally lose more muscle, which makes a lot of women will start to lose weight, you know, naturally earlier because they're losing muscle, which isn't ideal. So I think just understanding your body will look different than it looked when you were 10, and it will also look different than somebody in their 30s. I have that issue with some of our pros where it's like we have 18-year-olds and then we have 35-year-olds, and you're just not going to look the same, which is okay. It's great.
The composition changes, but it changes ever so slightly year after year after year, and that's where I was reading a thing on, as a man, I was reading a thing on testosterone and where your peak of testosterone, which is generally like 17 to 19.
Yep.
And then it's slowly degrading every single year. Now, you don't feel it because it's a small amount, but again, it's that compounding effect that by the time I hit 50 or 40 or 30, wherever the wall is for you, like there's a wall that every man hits, just like I'm sure there are things for women when you hit that wall and you're like, things are not working as crisp as they used to. Well, it didn't just happen. It was incrementally over time. And I think that's the part where I want people to understand there's things you can do and habits that you can create that you can push those walls back further.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like you can push them back further. So when it comes to nutrition, it's such an important, like I said, it's foundational. And I think that parents should start teaching their children and kids that are watching this should start understanding how important it is to get ahead of the game at a young age. Because if I could go back and do it all over again, I would start in my teens.
Absolutely.
Like in my teens, at the very latest, I would start because my quality of life would have been, and it was already great, but it would have been so much better.
Yeah, absolutely.
So much better.
Yeah.
Well,
definitely.
That was an awesome conversation.
Yeah,
I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
I hope that people got a lot out of our conversation and go back and like get the tidbits. But I got a ton out of it. I'll be rewatching it, taking notes.
Great.
It's kind of a thing I get to do with new guests is I get to get all this free knowledge.
Yeah, that's great. I love it.
So we'll be posting all this stuff up.
Great.
But
awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.